I'm Beth Hesselman. I am the HR director at Telligen. We're a healthcare, we do both healthcare and IT work in West Des Moines, Iowa, and we do have offices all over the nation. I'm joining you today because I'm part of the workforce committee with Technology Association of Iowa, and it's our goal this year to reach as many students here in the state of Iowa that we possibly can, to let you all know about the great tech opportunities that exist here in the state, and ask you to consider staying here in the state of Iowa after graduation, or if you choose to go outside the state after graduation, think about coming back someday. So that's why we're here. And I brought with me Mike Perrin, who's our manager of information security, and Brandy Lister, who's our information security analyst. So they'll be talking to you today about InfoSec within the healthcare and government contracting world. So I do have a PowerPoint here. Sorry, I'm not so used to WebEx, so bear with me. All right, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Yep.
All right, cool. So I'm just going to talk for about 10 or 15 minutes about the Iowa technology industry and then hand it over to Mike and Brandy, who will talk about information assurance in healthcare and government contracting. Why is it important? What skills do they use? What are some of the latest trends that they're seeing? Most of this data I have is from 2018, but the world of tech isn't slowing down at all. And in 2018, there were more than 92,000 Iowans who were working in tech, and that year alone, we added over 1,000 new tech jobs. And then at one time, there was over 34,000 tech postings. I would anticipate those numbers have just increased since then. Average tech salary is a little over $80,000 a year. You compare that to a California or New York. Yeah, the salaries are quite a bit higher, but your cost of living is considerably more as well. And for those of you who know and understand the world of compensation, unfortunately, salaries and cost of living increases don't equate equally. They're correlated, but they're not exactly the same. So certainly a benefit to being in Iowa with our cost of living. So the top 5 tech industries here in Iowa, IT services, industrial manufacturing, telecommunications and internet. We're seeing more and more startups, R&D, testing, InfoSec, and I'm sure you all know this is an ever-growing and more important field within tech, and then software development. So here in Iowa, we're solving all kinds of global problems with groundbreaking technology. So whether that be healthcare accessibility, which is one of the things that Telligen is involved in. And we've seen that through this last year of the pandemic, how important it is to reach people where they are with healthcare services at the right time, but also renewable energy sources to reduce climate change. Agriculture is trying to solve some of the food scarcity concerns that we have globally. And I just encourage you all to really start thinking about your tech career here in Iowa and where you can dig into some exciting opportunities where we're trying to solve some truly global problems. So we don't have everything here in Iowa, but what we have is pretty fantastic. So think about it as you're creating a big life in a small city. Communities across Iowa are quite regularly being awarded for high quality of life, low cost of living, access to amenities. And hopefully you all have been enjoying these opportunities as much as the pandemic has allowed you to. But whether you're from here or just here for college, it's our hope that you'll continue to enjoy these things as you begin your professional career. I'd just like to comment on the last bullet point here, which is accessibility to leadership and community building initiatives. Since becoming a member of the Technology Association of Iowa, there's a lot of CEOs of startups or even of large organizations like, Corteva or DuPont, who are very involved at a local level with the technology needs here in our local communities. Just a little bit about Telligen. We are an employee-owned organization. We're mid-size. We have about 630 employees nationwide. And our business is population health management. Our mission is to transform health. And really what we do is we combine data and data analytics with clinical interventions for federal, state, and commercial clients. An example, on the federal world, we had nurses who went into nursing homes with COVID outbreaks this year to help them understand quality improvement measures. All of that was based on data. What were the nursing homes and long-term care facilities who were struggling the most with COVID outbreaks? We built the first comprehensive pay-for-performance software system for the federal government. In the state, we saved one of our state clients, the state of Oklahoma, $185 million through health management. So through data, we determined, who was in the most highly diseased populations that we could impact, had the greatest impactability. And through our case management and disease management programs, not only did we improve health outcomes, but we also saved a lot of money. And then within the commercial space, we provide wellness and disease management programming. So you may have not ever heard of Telligen, but that's a little bit about us and who we are and what we do. I'm going to pause there and see if anyone has any questions around tech careers in Iowa or Telligen.
I've got a question. I got to be part of the Hyperstream program that was sponsored by the Technology Association of Iowa a few years ago. I was just kind of wondering, is there any ways to get involved with that, after you get out of college and all those sorts of things, kind of ways to give back?
Yeah, Tyler, that's incredible. So Hyperstream is a TAI program that is still in play. Let me reach out. I have actually a workforce committee meeting tomorrow and see what recommendations they would have to get involved. I know at Telligen, we've had a couple of technology professionals. One of them was a lead software developer who was part of, I think they call them mentors in the Hyperstream program.
Yeah, I believe that's what they call them.
Yeah.
Remember right.
But I'm wondering if there may even be an opportunity, Tyler, for you to get involved even at the college level. So yeah, I'll send you some information on that, or send it to Nicholas and he can get it out to the group if that would be okay.
Yeah, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah, there's a lot of, and for those of you who are from Iowa or went to middle school or even high school here, we're trying to do a lot to encourage STEM and tech at a very young age. So we have an intern with our organization right now who's I think a sophomore or junior in high school. So we're doing our best to try to reach Iowans at a younger and younger age.
I'd be kind of curious if anyone considered moving out of Iowa or did, and then why they decided to come back or why they decided not to move out.
Yeah, so I've been recruiting in IT, I don't know, probably 15 years. And what I tend to see, and this is, my opinion or my experience, is that people who move out of the state oftentimes move back when they're ready to start a family or want to be closer to their family or aging parents. It's also just quite expensive sometimes to live in, the Silicon Valley and some of your larger cities. I know Denver has experienced a really high spike in cost of living. So in my experience, it's typically when people want to start a family or move home and be a little bit closer to family, and maybe didn't realize the tech opportunities that exist here in Iowa. Mike and Brandy, I don't know if you guys have any perspective on that.
Yeah, so I'm Mike Perrin. Nice to meet everybody. Thanks for having me here today. Yeah, I can add a little bit to that because I was maybe in the situation some of you are in almost 20 years ago now. I graduated from Iowa State in 2003. And my plan was actually to move out of the state. I wanted to try something new. I had grown up in Iowa, and some of the big cities looked interesting or kind of a fun place to go to for me. So I know Chicago was one of the places I really wanted to go. And at the time, we just come out of the kind of the internet bubble, and jobs were really hard to come by. So it was very difficult for someone just coming out of college to find an opportunity at the time out of state. But in state, there was still opportunities to be had, and I got my start here. And I guess once I got started, I really enjoyed being in the state. I liked the Des Moines area, which is where I'm at now, a lot. And it's grown tremendously in the 20 years since I've graduated. The downtown is really thriving, and there's just a lot more to do than there used to be. And then as I did start a family here, and it's just been a good place for that as well. So I think there's a good mix of things to do. It's not too big, not too small, and then the opportunities have just been really good from a work perspective. So it wasn't by design that I had planned to stay here, but I did, and it's been really good for me. So that's my experience.
Yeah, I'm actually from Nebraska, so it's not much different than Iowa, I guess, but I've been here about 10 years, and ultimately I stayed here just because I kind of got a late start to getting a college degree, so I actually didn't pursue one until 2014. So I just decided to stay here local just because I like to be closer to family as well.
And the world as we know it has changed, right? I mean, you're seeing companies from the Silicon Valley come here and hire people because it's so much cheaper, right? So they can increase salaries and still get a high quality candidate. So I think you'll see more and more companies that maybe aren't Iowa based look to hire in Iowa because of the level of talent that we have here. That should be interesting for people in my position to try to continue to find good talent.
Definitely.
Other questions? I appreciate the shameless plug and allowing me to try to convince y'all to consider a career in Iowa. Very happy to introduce both Mike and Brandy. I don't know if Brandy brought her big wheel today or not, but I've been working with these two for a couple years now, and have really enjoyed my time with them and the great perspective that they bring with security and compliance to our organization and how that impacts our long-term equity. So I'll hand it over to them. I am going to have to drop off. I myself have class tonight, so forgive me if I drop off, but proud to introduce Mike and Brandy.
Thanks, Beth. Have a good night.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
All right, yeah, as I mentioned, my name is Mike Perrin. I'll just kind of kick off by introducing myself and give a little bit of background about my experience and how I landed in security. And then I'll hand it over to Brandy, and she can give a little bit of her background as well. So I graduated from Iowa State in 2003 with a degree in MIS, and got into IT infrastructure. So I started on the help desk, kind of moved into a desktop support role, and then to server network support. And then eventually I would get into a management position and have been more in that role for the last, I kind of lost track, probably 8 to 10 years. So along that journey, I've worked in a few different industries. I've been in insurance, higher education. I worked at Drake University for a while. And I've also been in financial services and now the healthcare industry. And previous to going into security, security was always a part of my job, but never the full focus. So some of the things I got experience with and being in infrastructure was PCI compliance. So that's a type of compliance that is applicable to people that handle credit cards. So certain kind of rules and regulations you have to follow there. Participate in disaster recovery a lot, being on the infrastructure team, and then just locking down or securing network and servers. But about 3 years ago, in 2018, I had the chance to come on to Telligen and lead the information security team. And I've really enjoyed information security. I think that's where my heart has always been. So it's nice to be doing that full time. And I'm planning to stay in information security for the rest of my career because it's been really enjoyable. So just finished my 3rd year at Telligen and looking forward to more. So with that, I'll let Brandy talk a little bit about herself and her background.
Yeah, so mine's not near as extensive as Mike's is. So I actually started getting my associate's degree in 2014, graduated in 2016 as a network admin. So straight out of my associate's degree, I started working at a finance company doing like desktop support, even some overnight support, and then jumped into kind of a systems engineer role. Then after doing that for a couple of years, I just decided that it wasn't really something that I wanted to do forever. And I kind of decided that maybe I wanted to get into security. So I was able to jump in on Telligen about 2018 July. And I kind of started there doing kind of your entry level security stuff, you know, security training, stuff like that. And then recently I've jumped into the role of our governance, risk, and compliance. So that's been more around handling our audits. We do a lot with our SOC 2 Type 2 audits every year. And also help out with our disaster recovery and tabletop tests. Just kind of safeguards are in place that are supposed to. My bachelor's degree is set to graduate. Trying to do that, and then I got my Security Plus certification. Last October, I think it was. And then once I finish school, I do want to get a couple more certifications because I do believe that's going to help me further my career with security, as well as just give me a better understanding of security as a whole. My certification I really want to get into next was probably going to be something around measures. I don't even know what I said better, but yeah, definitely just because I'm a little bit newer to the security, loving it as well.
So we really mean for this to be interactive today. So if at any point you want to just stop and questions either related to what we're talking about, or even if it's not, that's just fine as well. What we planned on is just talking about why security was important at Telligen, talking about some of the skills that we use there, and then going into some trends that we're seeing in the field. But we can certainly divert from that and go any way you'd like. We'll try to leave time at the end for some questions anyways. But feel free to stop us along the way, just to make sure. We have until 6, is that right?
We really have until we go long/short all the time.
Okay.
So if we go a little bit long, if you guys have the free time, we can go a little bit long. If we run out of discussion questions, we can stop a little bit short.
Okay.
I did have one quick question.
Yeah.
I saw there was a GRC analyst in your bio. I don't know what GRC means.
Oh, very good. Brandy, you want to talk to that one?
Yeah. Yeah, so that stands for governance, risk, and compliance. So that kind of deals a lot with making sure that we're following certain regulations. Like, since we do a lot of state and federal government work, there's a lot of regulations we have to follow, like NIST standards. There's standards for like the SOC 2 Type 2. And then recently we've been kind of dabbling in our Mars E regulations, and they're just kind of regulatory controls that are out there to tell you exactly what to do with certain settings. Like, let's say you have to have an inactivity on your PC set to 15 minutes, so that way it locks out after 15 minutes. So it's mainly just making sure that we are compliant around those sorts of things. And then the risk portion of it is just to kind of do a risk analysis of the company, just to determine what our risks are and put those risks into a risk register, and then be able to kind of tackle those and mitigate those as time goes on.
Thanks, Brandon. Does that answer your question?
Are you able
Nick?
to see the chat? Yeah, that does. Are you guys able to see the chat?
Yeah, I
function?
just need to bring it up.
I just opened it. Yes, I
yes, I
can
can
see
see
it.
the chat now.
Okay, because sometimes it's a little bit easier rather than interrupting you to sort of throw a question up, so you can get to it
Sure, yeah. Yeah, very good.
when able.
Cool.
Okay, so I'll start just kind of talking about why security is important at Telligen. So Beth explained a little bit that we're in healthcare, which we are, but we also are a government contractor. So most of our clients are either state or federal government, and that brings with it a lot of different regulations that we have to meet. So Brandy started to talk about her role. I really look at our security team is broken into two kind of areas. One is the compliance side and the risk and making sure that we're compliant to laws and regulations like HIPAA. And then there's many other regulations that the federal government has and some of the state governments. And then also the audit function that she plays there. So making sure our security controls are in place, making sure that we're mitigating risk. She also handles our disaster recovery and in our education component. So educating our workforce on cybersecurity, along with several other things, but those are some of our primary roles. And then we have the more kind of technical side of security, which is the security engineering in our operations center. So there we're really looking for security. So on the operations center, we're working on building that out, but we have really one person or a little bit more than one that's focused on looking for activity through our logs and things like that that would indicate that we've been compromised or something, someone's breaking some sort of security rule that we have in place, looking for threats to our organization and then mitigating those. We also have a security engineering function where we have someone that helps work with infrastructure and a development team on new and existing infrastructure or software products and making sure that those are secured. So for instance, we're working on moving our on-premise data center to AWS in the cloud. So that person is very involved in making sure that we're doing that securely, working with those teams and putting best practices in place. So we have kind of the compliance and risk side and then the more kind of technical part of security. So that's what makes up our program. And, as far as the importance of security at Telligen, we can't get new work or opportunities without meeting certain compliance standards like HIPAA. So it's really important that we're meeting those and we can prove that to be able to get more customers. And it's also really important that we're actually securing that data, going beyond the compliance and making sure that we have good controls in place and that our data that we're safeguarded with, which we have a lot of health information of individuals, is secured. So that's why it's, I guess, really important and kind of how our team is made up. Brandy, anything to add in there?
I just kind of wanted to add that. So I feel like with the increase of ransomware and like hacking attacks due to the pandemic and a lot more people being remote, we do get a lot more security questionnaires from our federal and state contracts, just saying, you know, they're a lot more stringent on asking like what we're following, what kind of type of controls we do have in place. And they're asking kind of more about like a higher level of security than they have in the previous years, which has been important for me to be able to understand just the different kind of controls that are out there that they are looking at, just so that we can be sure to safeguard their data, since in some instances we actually house that contract's data at our data center as well.
Yeah, good point. I was gonna mention later on with some of the trends that are going on, but that's a good point to bring up now. It's just, if you've been following the news, SolarWinds had a big breach, and then they're a company that does monitoring and other administrative and even security things for other businesses. And then Microsoft just had their Exchange email system compromised, which is really making the news and going to have a big impact. So we're seeing a lot more scrutiny around us as a business to make sure that our security practices are stringent enough and that we're actually safeguarding the data. So that becomes more and more important. I think it's going to be a continued trend for us. Any questions around that?
How do you like prepare for like a SolarWinds style thing, like all these exchange like problems?
Yeah, I think it's hard to prepare for that. And in some ways that's a little bit new. I mean, there's always been vulnerabilities, but not, I would say these last two, the SolarWinds and Microsoft, those have been two huge events that have impacted private, public sectors. And it's really difficult to prepare for. I would have to say, in some ways, we at Telligen lucked out. Exchange, we don't have on-premise, so we weren't vulnerable to that. So that was just kind of lucky. And the other SolarWinds we did use, but our versions weren't, at least at this time, don't seem to be vulnerable. So you can do your due diligence as an organization. So we have a responsibility when we sign a contract with, say, SolarWinds or Microsoft to make sure that their data is secure. But when you're talking about a company like Microsoft, I mean, the reality is we can't, I mean, you almost have to use their products, and we don't have a lot of influence at our size to be able to make sure that they're secure. So you're depending a lot more on the rest of the, the rest of the U.S. and the larger companies and the government to make sure that they're secure. And I think we're going to see a big change in some of those practices going forward, and we're kind of yet to see what those are. But I know the new administration is looking or about to announce several cybersecurity related initiatives, and it'll be interesting to see what those are. But I think what's clear is that, what we're doing today is just not working. We're talking now about hundreds of thousands of companies that have been compromised, and I think the fallout is going to be pretty big. So as far as preparing, I think you just have to kind of react at this point. You got to see if you're compromised, and then you have to look for those signs of compromise, figure out if you were compromised, what was compromised, and then you have to be able to deal with that fallout. You've got to communicate if you've had a breach of your information to your customers, and learn to safeguard against those kind of things. So I think with SolarWinds, you're seeing new things around like software signing. So to help, I mean, a lot of it is just learning. So we learned where we're vulnerable, and now we have to start to protect in different ways than maybe we thought about or put an emphasis on before. So it's really important from these sort of things that we learn from them and don't let them happen again. So it's probably not a great answer, but I think a lot of it really at this point is reactive, and then learning and trying to do better, but we're going to need, I think, as a country, to figure out better ways to protect ourselves against these sort of attacks, because they're being, it looks like they're being mostly drawn, or we're being attacked from other countries like Russia, China, that have huge amounts of resources that individual companies aren't prepared to fight against. So I almost think we're going to have to take this from a U.S. level, and how are we going to protect and safeguard against that? So I feel like we're just in the middle of it right now, so it's going to be interesting to see where that goes. Probably lots of opportunities for all of us in cybersecurity. Any other questions? Or does that answer your question? I mean, I guess it's not really an answer. I'm not sure yet, but it'll be interesting to see.
I mean, it's sort of a, there is no answer kind of answer, I feel like.
Yeah, that's what I would say.
Might be the case.
I feel like right now we don't have a good answer for it. And like with Exchange, you could say, well, you can patch your servers. Well, in this case, Microsoft knew about this attack, I think they're saying in January, and it wasn't made publicly known until later. At that point, it's too late to patch. I mean, you can patch, but you've already been compromised. And so a lot of the things that we do in the security world today to try to prevent these things are, I think a weakness is in that supply chain. Like if you're trusting Microsoft and they're not doing their job, then you will get compromised by using Microsoft. So I think there's still a gap there in how we better secure the software and hardware that we're using in our organizations. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to move to is just kind of our most used skills. That was a topic on there. I'll talk about what I use, and then Brandy probably uses a different skill set. I rely a lot in my position, which is a management position. So I lean a lot on my background of infrastructure. So having been in infrastructure for 15 years, I have a lot of experience and understanding of how networks and servers and that side of IT works. And so that's helped me in this role to be able to help protect those systems, because I understand some of the challenges around that. And I also can help, it also helps me keep that team accountable, as well as have some empathy for what they're going through. I mean, they're really focused on the infrastructure side and getting systems up, keeping the network going. And it can be difficult to balance the business needs of getting things into production and out with security. So I think it gives me a little bit of empathy for them as well. A lot of what I depend on, I would say, is just the soft skill side of things. Communication is really important in security. You're working with all levels of the organization. I am working with other managers, I'm working with engineers and admins, and then I'm also working with executive leadership and present to the board of directors a couple of times a year. So a broad group of people, and so communication and the ability to influence at those different levels is really important. And then I think continual learning. This field is always changing. Technology is always changing, so you've got to be willing to constantly learn. When I graduated in 2003, AWS was still like basically an online bookstore. So the cloud wasn't really a thing as far as servers and everything was on premise. And now there's been a complete shift in that. So I've got to I've got to learn AWS, I've got to learn Microsoft Azure and these different technologies. So I think that ability just to be able to learn new things is really important. And it's part of what I really enjoy about my job. So that fits in well with my personality, I guess. Brandy, what things would you say?
Yeah, so I feel like I do use a lot of, so I do a lot with our training component. So I do a lot of our security awareness training, and then I also talk to all of our new hires about security. So I feel like there's a understanding there just over like basic security knowledge on how to, spot a phishing email, how to securely send PHI, PII. Just being able to be kind of on a high level, HIPAA compliant for our users, being able to explain that to them in a way that isn't super technical and it's easier for them to understand, just because we have such a wide variety of individuals that work at Telligen, and so I need to be able to speak with all of them. I'd say I also do a lot with our disaster recovery tabletop stuff. So then with that, I am doing a lot of like kind of scenario based. So I kind of think of like disaster scenarios and be able to communicate those to the people that are going to be in that tabletop test, where we actually test the scenario to see if all of our backups and our infrastructure is working the way it's supposed to. And a lot of times in those tabletop tests, we do have executive level and then on down to just our, developers and infrastructure teams. So we have to be able to communicate together and in a way that our executive team can understand, where our gaps are as well as where our strengths are. So we can't just kind of always talk in our technical jargon during that meeting. We have to be able to speak at a higher level. I would say I also do a lot with, which I'm learning because I just got into the GRC portion. I didn't realize how many regulations there are out there. And I'll tell you what, the government words that stuff in such a terrible way that's hard to understand. So sometimes I'm like Googling just sentences to figure out what exactly they're trying to tell me to do. I've definitely learned a lot over this last year. And like Mike said, I'm going to continue to learn more just because there's such a wide variety of stuff out there. So I think it's helpful for me to have a background in network administration as well as a little bit of desktop work, because I can kind of understand how those things kind of piece together, and then understand what the regulatory control is trying to say about servers and desktops and those sorts of things. I am starting to learn more about the cloud now as well. That's something that's definitely a weak point for me just because I haven't been around it that much. But I definitely plan on spending a lot more time in that area this year, especially.
Thanks, Randy. I'll pause there before we move on. Any questions? I don't see any in the chat window. Any other questions for us at this point?
Well, I suppose to ask real quick, you guys both mentioned you want to learn more about the cloud. How are you planning to do that?
A good question. So there's a lot of resources on cloud. So I'll talk specifically about AWS. So there's a lot of online resources to learn from. I use, it used to be called, they're combining. There's a Cloud Guru is the name of the online training. And then it used to be Linux Academy. Those have now combined into one online training source. So I am going through some training there on the security-specific certification for AWS. And then we're an AWS partner, and so we get some free training through there. So I do a lot of self-training through online accounts. Sometimes, I'm able to take a class here or there. In this case, I'm not right now, so I'm just doing self-study. And then I think AWS makes it really easy to sign up for like a free tier or free account. So you can either follow along in labs that are available through some of those resources I talked about, or you can just sign up for a free account and play around in there and learn a lot. So I think getting that hands-on experience, even if it's in a lab environment, is really helpful.
Yeah, and I'll actually add on to that. So I am planning on I have a couple classes coming up that are going to be around cloud security. So I'm hoping to learn a lot within that class, as well as, utilizing our AWS partnership and hopefully getting some free training that way. And then I may actually pick Mike's brain too, just kind of ask him to kind of explain to me along the way as well, just to kind of make sure I'm understanding the process.
Is that helpful? I would be curious at Iowa State, are you doing a lot with cloud-based systems or cloud security in your different areas?
I am unaware of any class focused on clouds.
Yeah.
There may be something, I think there's something with like distributed computing or something at the 400 and 500 level.
Yeah, there's a distributed systems class that I'm in right now, but it doesn't really talk about cloud. It talks a little bit about like edge computing, not a ton. It's mostly focused on like blockchain, but not really like AWS or Azure or anything like that.
There's a few free sorts. So I don't know. I like, I'm not sure how familiar you are with some of the online training. There's some pretty inexpensive or free resources. It's been a little while since I've checked this one. It's called Cybrary, C-Y-B-R-A-R-Y. They have a lot of, at least they did, unless they've changed their model, and that's possible. But free online training for different types of classes. And I found that to be pretty good. I never say this right, but I think it's Udemy, or is that right? Udemy, U-D-E-M-Y. They have a lot of different deals and cheap courses that you can find. So I would suggest those, and even AWS sometimes has free courses. So if you do some Googling, I think you can find some resources that are low cost or free, and I would encourage you to do that, as well as just online labs. I think are important. Or I'm sorry, like a free tier. Just sign up for a free AWS account and try out some of their free stuff and see how it works. That can go a long way as well. So that kind of segues into what I see as trends going on. So cloud is a huge one. More and more, the data that we're wanting to protect is moving from what used to be a very secure on-premise data center and locked down site. Now that data is going all kinds of places, and it can be hard to track. The cloud is readily available to our end users, and sometimes they're doing things that you're not aware of. And then even the things you are aware of, like Microsoft or Office 365 and AWS and all these different, Salesforce and all these different online resources, data can get moved around very quickly without you knowing about it. And so there's a real shift right now in security on how do you, and then let me also backtrack and just say the other thing that's really changing is remote work. So up before COVID hit, I would say remote work was getting more and more popular, but after COVID, in many instances, everybody worked from home. So that was the case at Telligen. Everybody pretty much works from home. So overnight, that really changed how we need to protect our employees. And because before they're in your office and you have secure firewalls, you have all these different security systems in your office. Well, now they're plugging their computer in at home and they're sharing their network with their kids and who knows what devices they have or security they have set up on their network. So there's a real shift in how we're securing systems. The shift, I would say, is a focus on secure the data wherever it is, rather than focusing on securing a location. So that's a big trend, I'm saying. A couple other ones is, we talked about it already, so I won't go much more into it, but supply chain risk. So we talked about Microsoft and SolarWinds. How do you protect yourself from them and weaknesses in their system? And I think that's still being determined. There's certainly a level of due diligence you can do, but I still think with these big news events, it kind of proves that we're not doing it effectively. If you have hundreds of thousands of organizations of all sizes and the government itself being compromised, that tells me we have a real weakness we're gonna have to solve for there. So that's a close one to watch. A couple other trends, I see privacy becoming more and more of a big deal. So you might be familiar with some legislation like GDPR out of the European Union or CCPA in California. Those are some big privacy-focused legislations around not just securing the data, but making sure it's private, that organizations are not misusing that data, and that the users have access to the data and can have it removed when they want to, things like that. So that's a big trend and very complex. The GDPR is kind of nice because that's all the European Union goes to that standard. In the United States, we're still very segmented. So you had California come out with their legislation. And now I think there's 12 other states that are developing their own legislation. So it's kind of a mess to filter through and a challenge, but it's still very important. And I think that will be another big trend. And I would look for eventually some sort of legislation coming out of the federal government that kind of unites those things, or I hope so anyways, because for Brandy and I, it's really challenging when you're working in different states and have different users of your system in different states to adhere to all these different types of legislation. A couple other things, I'm seeing more and more artificial intelligence being used for both the bad guys and for those of us trying to protect the network. So systems are getting smarter using artificial intelligence and automation to both secure their systems and try to break into them. So I see that playing a larger and larger role. And then I'm convinced that eventually we won't use passwords. We'll use something else like biometrics or some other method, because passwords continue to be one of the biggest reasons we get compromised. In fact, whether this is true or not, SolarWinds is blaming their whole hack right now on an intern that worked for them instead of weak password on one of their systems. So Brandy and I, though, see that with our users. It's a real challenge if someone's not appropriately putting in a good password to be compromised, or they give out their password through a phishing attempt. So those are some of the trends that I'm seeing. What about you, Brandy?
Before we jump into that, there is one question in the chat about would you just be encrypting the data to secure it? And I think it would be to do it that way, but it's going to be encrypting at rest and in transit to make sure it's secure. I'm trying to think about from like a desktop's perspective. We encourage our users to store any of their sensitive info, in a secure location that's not on their actual PC. It needs to be in a secure drive where it's locked down by a least privilege, and we obviously would be securing data with our VPN. So as long as that's in place, and then be able to get into there, you want to have the multi-factor authentication set up as well. So I think there's just kind of a number of safeguards you want to have in place to be able to secure the data kind of from all areas.
Yeah, that's a good point, Brandy, and thanks. I missed that in the window. Yeah, encryption, Nicholas, is really key. It's a key control, but it's not bulletproof. I mean, at some point that data has to become unencrypted so the system or the user can see it. So if the system or the user gets compromised, then the attacker has access to that data in an unencrypted format. So there's some ways that you can help protect against that, but it's a really important safeguard, but it's not completely bulletproof by any means. But it is a key security control, definitely.
And then I just wanted to jump back to the cloud a little bit. So I feel like with the cloud being so hot topic and a lot of organizations switching to that, it is great from a disaster recovery perspective because it's easy to fail over from one availability zone to the next if you're using AWS. And so it kind of makes your downtime almost non-existent if you have it set up in the proper way. So I feel like the cloud is going to be huge going forward for many companies. You actually touched on most of the trends that I wanted to speak on. I do want to say that, ransomware has been a hot topic, and so I grew up in Beatrice, Nebraska, and my hometown hospital actually got hit with ransomware, and they were down for almost 2 weeks straight. The nurses had to, write everything down on pen and paper, and so I think it's a real issue for not only big cities, but even, rural communities. I don't think they care who they actually take down. So definitely something to be on the lookout for.
That's a good point. Ransomware continues to be a major threat to individuals but especially organizations, large and small. My dad owns a very small manufacturing company in Iowa, and they got a call a couple of weeks from him that they had been compromised with ransomware. Fortunately, they had some good backups and were able to get back up and going, but it continues to be a real threat everywhere. So yeah, good point.
There's a question, why are hospitals being targeted? We actually see them being targeted more just because they do have a lot of sensitive information known as public health information or person identifiable information. So they're able to kind of get in there and steal that data and then, be able to either sell it on the black market or just use that to be able to get the hospital to pay, that much more money because they know how valuable that data is to themselves as well as their patients. So, and I also find that hospitals don't tend to have as much security in place, I feel like, from the aspect of, protecting data and stuff. I mean, they're doing a better job now because it's becoming a lot more popular, but I'm thinking back to, gosh, how long ago has it been since that Unity Point one that happened where they got hit with a phishing scam and a bunch of data got, taken from them. They've definitely changed their practices a lot, I feel like, to be a lot more secure.
Yeah, I think you really hit it, Randy. If you ever look at your health records, it's got your social security number, your birth. I mean, it's got pretty much all the information about you that someone that wants to commit identity theft with could use. So it's just a wealth of information, so it makes it a valuable target. And then the healthcare industry, unfortunately, ranks pretty low on the industries as far as how secure they are. Healthcare has got a long ways to go in kind of catching up with financial services and some of those other organizations that have had better security practices in play for a longer time. I think there's several reasons for that, but it's the reality. So they're kind of an easy target, and their data is very valuable. Any other questions?
So I'm kind of the odd guy out of the group. I'm an MIS major also, and
All right.
just kind of wondering I kind of want to go the infrastructure route and just don't really 100% want to get into cyber. I'm trying to work towards getting my CISA Plus certification from CompTIA, and maybe also trying to tack on Security Plus and then Pen Test Plus from them. Are those something that is going to kind of be really beneficial at a certain point?
Yeah, so you say you don't want to get into cyber or...
No, I do.
Oh, you do? Okay. Sorry, I misunderstood. Go ahead, Brandy, and then I'll add on.
No, so I just wanted to say, I feel like certifications are definitely, almost the golden ticket, if you will, just because, people want a degree, but they also, it seems like a lot more organizations are asking for, the CISSP, Security Plus, those sorts of things. So I feel like if you're going to be getting into, you said the CISA Plus from CompTIA, that's the
that's
certified.
It's their analyst certification.
Okay, yeah. I feel like one of our people either have that or going to get that. Is that right, Mike?
I'm not
Roger,
positive on
maybe?
that one. He might be.
I thought maybe he was, but no, I think it's a great path to go down because, ultimately when you're applying for a job, you need to look really good on paper first so they want to be able to talk to you. So I think, your path, that's great.
Yeah, I agree. I think certifications, first off, they're just a really good learning tool. So you need to learn anyway. So I think it's a good way to learn and get that certification that can help you in landing a job, particularly when you're coming out of college. Certifications can be more important. That's my personal opinion, but when you have less experience to draw on, it's nice to be able to point to, well, I don't have the experience yet, but I've educated myself and I'm certified in this. So I think that's really good. And those ones that you're talking about, I think Security Plus is a great one to start with. I would encourage anyone getting started to go through that certification. It really hits the foundations. And I don't know, it's a really good starting point. So I think that's really good. And then it depends where you want to focus your security kind of career. Career, but also like you want to focus on infrastructure or software development security or more of the compliance and audit side. So that plays a difference too in which certifications you might get. But with any of those, I would start with Security Plus. Are you wanting to get into pen testing and that kind of thing?
Well, I'm also minoring in business technology consulting, which is something new that they've kind of added to the College of Business in the last couple of years. So.
Okay. And what do they do in that? Did you say it's business consulting?
Yeah, business technology consulting is the name of the minor.
Oh, business technology. Okay. So you'd be helping organizations with technology and security then potentially?
Possibly.
Yeah. Yeah, I do think I would encourage you to get some cloud training. There's a number of ways to do that. You can go with a more generic cloud certification that might be good for you when you're not sure if you're going to be helping other organizations. You might not know if they're going to be using AWS or Microsoft or what cloud they're going to use. But I think getting some education around that's important because it's just more and more common and will continue to be, as far as I can tell, into the future where data is not going to reside in companies anymore. It's going to be in a company, but someone else's, probably Microsoft or AWS right now, or Google maybe.
And I'm just going to add my 2 cents here. Being a grad student in cybersecurity and working full time, I can tell you that from an AWS standpoint, probably the best one to start off with is Cloud Practitioner Associate. It's like their entry level one. It's great to get you an understanding of like what AWS is, how you do it. And that will definitely aid you as more businesses kind of move over to the cloud or a hybrid cloud infrastructure. You can utilize those skills that you learned in pretty much any cloud.
That's a really good point. Thanks for adding that on. That's a great starting place in the cloud.